Mission control monitors track the target. 3, 2, 1, 0. The signal locks. High above the Earth, the capsule detaches and begins its plunge. It hits the outer atmosphere at Mach 25. The air outside the hull compresses instantly, turning into a sheath of white-hot plasma. Inside the control center, screens flicker with telemetry data. The descent is not a controlled glide, but a brutal, high-speed fall through the thin upper layers of the atmosphere. Sensors register the vibration as the structure fights the atmospheric drag. Every second counts. The team watches the heat shield temperature spike, the numbers climbing past critical limits. The capsule screams across the sky, a streak of fire visible against the dark blue of the stratosphere. It is a controlled projectile, a falling star engineered to survive the friction of re-entry. The data stream shows the trajectory holding steady despite the immense forces tearing at the exterior frame. Tension fills the room as the capsule drops lower, moving out of the black void and into the dense air below. It is moving too fast to see, a blur of metal and heat descending rapidly toward the vast, empty expanse of the Australian outback. The silence of the control room is absolute as the final, violent phase of the flight begins. The impact came with a dull, heavy thud that shook the red soil for meters in every direction. A plume of dust rose, then slowly settled over the landing site. The capsule sat half-buried, its base charred black, while the heat shield continued to glow a faint, dying cherry red. The air around it shimmered with residual heat. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then, the internal cooling fans cycled on, a low hum breaking the desert silence. The outer casing began to tick as the metal contracted in the cooling evening air. Inside the pressurized core, the automated sequence triggered. A mechanical arm rotated, unlatching the primary storage rack. It pulled a single small glass container into the center of the inspection bay. The vial held a clear, liquid compound of ritonavir. It rested inside the rack, untouched by the turbulence of the fall. This was not a military asset. It was a pharmacy. The first commercial drug ever manufactured in microgravity had arrived on the surface. The payload was secure, the chemical structure preserved within the glass, marking the end of its journey from orbit to the outback floor. The perfection inside that vial stands in stark contrast to how medicine is made on the ground. On Earth, gravity acts as a constant, invisible disruptor during the manufacturing process. As chemical compounds transition from liquid to solid, crystals begin to grow, seeking a uniform, stable lattice structure. But gravity has other plans. It pulls down on the forming molecules, forcing them to settle unevenly. This downward pressure causes the crystals to crowd together and deform. Instead of clean, symmetrical shapes, they develop jagged edges, internal fractures, and misaligned atomic layers. These structural defects are not merely cosmetic. They compromise the chemical stability of the final compound. When scientists attempt to pack these imperfect crystals into a solution, the results are inconsistent. The impurities make the drugs harder to dissolve, less stable on the shelf, and physically painful for patients to receive via injection. The uneven clusters clog delivery mechanisms and force healthcare providers to rely on bulky, diluted IV drips rather than concentrated doses. Gravity, which holds the planet together, effectively tears the molecular architecture of medicine apart. It is a fundamental limit of terrestrial production that dictates the quality of every drug synthesized within the reach of the Earth's pull. In the silence of orbit, the rules of chemistry shift. Varda launches automated mini-factories into low Earth orbit, each roughly the size of a standard kitchen refrigerator. These units isolate the manufacturing process from the chaotic interference of gravity. Inside, computer-controlled systems mix chemical compounds within a weightless environment. Without the relentless downward pull of Earth, the molecules are free to arrange themselves based on their own inherent properties. There is no settling, no crushing weight, and no accumulation of impurities. As the liquid solution cools, the crystals grow in a slow, deliberate dance. They form perfect, uniform lattices, atom by atom, with a precision that is physically impossible to achieve on the ground. Each crystal develops as a symmetrical, flawless structure. This purity is the goal of the entire mission. Because the growth process remains undisturbed, the resulting compound reaches a state of total structural integrity. These crystals are not just pure, they are highly concentrated and stable, possessing a consistency that allows for a predictable, reliable medical product. The environment of space provides the blank canvas needed to forge medicine at the molecular level, removing the structural defects that plague every gram of drug synthesized under the weight of the world. This molecular precision changes how medicine reaches the human body. Because these space-grown crystals are uniform and stable, they do not require the massive dilution needed for ground-based drugs. On Earth, inconsistent crystals force doctors to pack compounds into large, watery solutions that must be administered through bulky intravenous drips. A patient might spend hours tethered to a stand while the fluid slowly enters their system. In the clinic, this setup requires constant monitoring and limits the patient to a hospital bed. But the space manufacturer product removes this physical bottleneck. With high purity, highly concentrated compounds, the entire required dose shrinks in volume. A vial that once demanded a liter of fluid now fits into a single, small syringe. The change is immediate and transformative. Instead of an afternoon lost to an IV, a patient receives a quick, simple injection. The drug enters the bloodstream in seconds, precisely controlled and fully effective. This efficiency reduces hospital reliance, lowers the risk of infusion-related infections, and gives time back to the person receiving the treatment. By perfecting the crystal, the mission effectively streamlines the entire delivery process, turning a complex, hours-long medical ordeal into a brief, routine intervention that fits easily into a patient's daily life. Translating this scientific potential into a reality is a logistical nightmare. The path from the lab to the stars demands a machine capable of enduring two distinct, hostile environments. First, the factory must survive the launch. As a rocket clears the tower, it generates violent, high-frequency vibrations that threaten to shake delicate sensors and microfluidic channels to pieces. Every joint, every weld, and every circuit board must withstand forces that would shatter standard industrial equipment. Once in orbit, the challenge shifts from survival to autonomy. There is no technician to replace a failed valve or recalibrate a drifting sensor. The system must function perfectly, without human intervention, for weeks at a time. It manages temperature fluctuations, chemical mixing, and crystal growth while circling the planet at 17,000 miles per hour. If a single component fails, the entire batch of medicine is lost. Engineers must build a closed-loop environment that operates with absolute reliability in the vacuum of space. The stakes are immense. The project requires a level of mechanical resilience that pushes the current limits of aerospace technology. Every successful cycle is a victory against the inevitable entropy of space, proving that the hardware can endure the brutal transition from the launch pad to the stars and back again. The final stage of the journey begins with a calculated plunge. The capsule fires its thrusters, dropping out of stable orbit and into the thin, invisible wall of the upper atmosphere. Speed is the enemy. It hits the air at Mach 25, turning kinetic energy into a roar of heat. The exterior temperature spikes, climbing past 3,000 degrees in seconds. The heat shield glows a violent cherry red, fighting to keep the interior cold enough to preserve the vials. Inside the mission control room, the air is still. Screens display a single, flickering dot descending across the monitor. Telemetry feeds stutter as the plasma sheath forms around the craft, blocking radio signals. For minutes, the team can only watch the projected trajectory. The capsule is a falling star, a streak of fire carving a path through the dark. It skips across the atmosphere, shedding velocity in a series of violent, jarring decelerations. Every connection, every bolt, and every sensor is pushed to the point of structural failure. As the friction eases, the glow fades from blinding white to a dull, cooling orange. The capsule is no longer a satellite, it is a projectile, plummeting toward the vast, empty expanse of the Australian desert. The descent is silent on the ground, but in the data logs, the mission is screaming toward the surface. A dull, heavy impact thuds against the desert floor. The capsule is down. It sits half buried in the red earth, still radiating a sharp, shimmering heat that warps the air around it, miles away. The recovery team reacts instantly. Engines roar to life, tires spinning and throwing up clouds of fine, crimson dust as the vehicles tear across the barren landscape. The terrain is a nightmare of scrub brush and hidden washouts. Every bump threatens to snap an axle or slow their momentum. Inside the lead vehicle, the team monitors the thermal sensors. The internal temperature is climbing. The desert sun beats down on the metal hull, acting like an oven, while the heat shield continues to bleed residual energy into the payload compartment. They're fighting a clock that does not pause. If they do not reach the site and extract the vial within minutes, the delicate crystalline structure of the medicine will begin to break down, rendering the entire mission worthless. They push the engines to the limit, weaving between ancient rock formations and dry creek beds. The landing site grows closer on the GPS map, a single critical point in a vast sea of red. They hit the brakes, sliding to a halt in a spray of sand, and jump out. The race against the heat has entered its final, desperate stage. The recovery team swarms the impact crater. The metal hull is hot enough to blister skin through thick gloves. They work in a rhythm born of months of practice, attaching specialized tools to the exterior hatch. A bolt shears off with a sharp, metallic ping, but the seal holds. They apply pressure, bracing their feet against the shifting sand, straining until the lock clicks. The hatch groans and swings wide. A wave of trapped, superheated air rolls out, smelling of scorched sealant and ozone. They do not pause for air. The lead technician reaches into the compartment, navigating past the charred insulation to the central canister. It is a moment of absolute stillness in the middle of the desert. The technician rotates the latch, pulls the canister free, and lifts it into the light. With a steady hand, they uncap the inner housing. Inside, resting in its mount, the vial of ritonavir sits untouched. The liquid is perfectly clear. There is no cloudiness, no sign of structural collapse, and no degradation. The crystalline lattice remains uniform, held together by the very perfection of the microgravity process. They hold it up, the sunlight catching the glass, confirming what the telemetry had only suggested. The experiment worked. The laws of gravity have been bypassed, and the drug is ready. The recovery of this single vial signals far more than a technical victory. It marks the foundation of a multi-billion-dollar industry that operates beyond the reach of gravity. United Therapeutics and Varda are no longer merely conducting experiments. They are scaling production lines that bypass the limitations of Earth-based chemistry. The basement laboratory, with its reliance on terrestrial physics, is now a relic of the past. Future medicine will not be constrained by the settling of crystals or the presence of impurities. Instead, it will be designed in the silence of orbit, where automated systems create uniform lattices that were previously impossible to achieve. This is the new architecture of healing. Every successful landing serves as a proof of concept, turning the void of space into a manufacturing floor. The logistics are complex, the environments are extreme, and the risks are significant, yet the results justify the scale. We are witnessing the shift of an entire sector from the ground to the stars. The era of space-made medicine is no longer a theoretical pursuit. It is happening now. With each flight, the next generation of life-saving drugs is being forged in the stars, forever altering how we treat disease on Earth.